Checking the sound. One of the biggest questions we get from people is, what's the best overlanding vehicle? It's an impossible question for us to answer for anyone. The only one who can answer that is the person themselves. There's so many different aspects to how you travel, what country you travel. Do you just do it on weekends? Do you do it for long term? A lot of people will tell people what to do, and we've fallen for that trap. Everybody has opinions and they're all good. It's just what works best for you. When looking into choosing a vehicle and equipping it, choosing spare parts to carry, all that stuff, you have to think about your route, where you're going, everything. And I can only talk about our experiences and what we've done. For everybody, it's going to be different. My opinion is that there are no real bad brands. So, some of the vehicles that I wouldn't choose for us and the way we travel are things like pickup trucks with tray backs, vans. Anything over about 7,000 pounds is probably too big for us. In Australia, a lot of people use tray backs. The tray back's nice and everything, and I think it's good if traveling on weekends and always coming back home. Another example of vehicles we wouldn't like are big motorhome type vehicles that are really nice when it's bad weather and you can get inside and you could stay inside for a week and it'd be great. But they're so big and there's so many places you can't go when you have a truck that big. A lot of places in Australia actually forbid trucks that are of that size. They're too big. You get one of those stuck and you better have one or two more of them to get you out. When we traveled through, I think it was Ecuador, with some friends that have a large square box on wheels. It's funny because even the power lines going across the road in some of the small villages, they would hit. They'd have to get out and push them up so they could get under it. Our vehicle for us right now is a vehicle like we have. Any decent sized vehicle that's under about 7,000 pounds seems to be what we're able to work with right now. Vans, there's some very difficult places to get back in where we like to go. But you also have to think of where you're at. And if you're going only for a week or for a weekend, it's different than if you're living in it full time. And your comfort level too. There's a lot of comfort to be had with a bigger vehicle. Other pieces to think about is the motor, power. It used to be a lot more difficult years back with gas engines in some parts of the world. I think it's gotten easier to have a gas engine. We prefer diesel, better gas mileage and things like that, but we also have an older vehicle. We've run a lot of different motors and we like the V8 in the US. Fuel was cheap in the US. Gas stations are everywhere and you don't have an issue. I didn't have to put in extended fuel tanks or anything. But when you get in other parts of the world, it can be more difficult. I still think there's an advantage to diesel in a lot of ways, especially when you have an older vehicle. The newer vehicles, like I said, are fantastic and they get great gas mileage. With our V8, in our case, we would get about 14 miles per gallon. Now we can get over 25. We hear a lot that, diesels cost more and they harder to maintain and all that stuff, and we haven't found that to be so at all. So for us, in our vehicle, I'd take the diesel over gas-powered engine every time. The other thing is spare parts and your ability to change spare parts. When you travel like we do, there's not a mechanic on every corner like there is in the United States. You have to be able to change parts. We do pretty well. We have had to replace a water pump in the field. I've had brakes that I've had to change in the field, the brake pads, and it's really easy. Newer cars, it's much more difficult. Try and change a water pump on a new 2019, 2020, any vehicle. In our vehicle, it takes us, I can change the water pump in probably 45 minutes. Getting to know your vehicle and to be able to work on it is also another factor for us. If we were just in the US and traveling the US, it wouldn't be an issue. But traveling to where we go and what we do, being able to work on it is incredibly important to be able to do it yourself. Now I'm going to talk about the thing I hate the most, and it's electronics. The most issues we've seen in the last 4 years have been electronic issues with vehicles. We've seen probably 6 or 8 different makes of vehicles with electronic problems. We haven't had problems per se, but we've had electronic issues, and we don't have anything electronic on the car except our rear or our mirrors, our side mirrors, and our seats. And when we were in Colombia, we were traveling to a very isolated place in Colombia on the Venezuelan border. We hit a bump, and it moved. It's like this, and it moved down and back. So now I have to drive in a reclining position. And the controls have never worked, but it was in the perfect position. I had to spend an hour putting the seat back to where I needed to and then disconnect everything. The side mirrors are another funny issue because they'll just move out. We've had vehicles where the vehicle knock sensor would not allow the engine to start. We came up on a vehicle near Mitchell Falls in Australia, which is way far out there. They were probably on their 6th or 8th fuse that they've blown for their injector pump. We pretty much just wired their fuel shutoff valve so that there was no fuse, and you had to disconnect a wire from the battery to get it to shut off. But electronics are the biggest issues. When you get all the dust and water and constant bumping, you have an issue with it. So that is my biggest hatred with every vehicle, and that scares me with the new vehicles. And with traveling with that style of vehicle, we've also used various rooftop tents over the years, and we've liked that. But as all things go, we're changing, and we want to have the same vehicle, but we want to make it so we can actually be inside a lot and actually kind of sleep and live inside without having to mostly stop, pop up a rooftop tent, and live on the outside. There are plenty of times we sat in rainstorms in the front seats eating dinner. So we want to change that up a little bit, and so we're going to try it on Reggie. We're going to modify him a little bit and see what we can do to make that style of vehicle for us. Now I have my list, and if you want to pin me down and say what I would buy today for an overland vehicle, it'd have to have a few things on it that are important to me and how we travel. It'd have to be diesel, 4-wheel drive, a high clearance 4-wheel drive, automatic transmission. I think a vehicle always needs to have more than 2 seats. We have essentially a 2-seater. I think you need to have at least 3. There's a lot of people out there that we would have picked up and given a ride, and you meet a lot of people and learn things doing that. So having a 3rd seat at least, maybe even 2 more seats to make 4, we would do. It's got to be registered in the US, it's got to be coil sprung, and it's got to be over 25 years old. And the reason for that is my hatred of electronics. Those are my key things. And so what does that leave for me as an American? My vehicles are on a very short list. One would be Land Rovers. Defender 110, 130, Range Rover, Discovery 1 or 2 even. Maybe. It's getting a little bit too new for me, but a Nissan Patrol. I really like the Nissan Patrols. They impressed me, especially some of the ones I saw in Colombia. And a Toyota 80 series. Those would be about the only vehicles I can think of that you can actually get in the United States that make sense for me and the way we travel. So remember, there's many, many choices, and none of them are wrong. There's only your choice and what you like and what you want. Going through this exercise of learning what type of vehicle we like to travel in has led us back to the people who inspired us to travel. The first hero that I had a long time ago is a man named Gunther Holtorf. Gunther, his wife Christine, and Otto, their 300 GD Mercedes, had some amazing adventures, and really excited me to think differently about life. Then there is Emil and Liliana Schmidt, who have been traveling continuously for over 35 years in a 1982 FJ60 Land Cruiser. 35 years! And how about Cohen Wubbles and Karen Majik Viz with their old Land Cruiser? Yet there were two families that had the biggest impact on our motivation to take the plunge and travel overland. The first was the Bell family. We met Graham, Louisa, Keelan, and Jessica Bell and their Land Rover Defender 130, and were privileged to spend a month or so with them in the U.S. And then in Australia, we essentially lived for a while with the amazing Ron and Viv Moon, who have traveled to the ends of the world in their Nissan GU Patrol. Both families had amazing, inspirational stories and taught us that we truly can make our own stories. More recently, we were very fortunate to be able to travel with Tim and Kelsey Huber in their 80 Series Toyota. They are an awesome couple from the U.S. that we really enjoyed meeting up with, as they have such an amazing energy for travel. These few are just a top of the list that we think embodies the experience of world overland travel. There are many others out there traveling and discovering this amazing planet and the people who call it home. The one similar thing that we see with all of these top-ranked travelers is that they all have vehicles that they love. Sure, they're not new, they're not excessive, and they don't break the budget. But the only thing they provide is a great travel experience. The goal isn't the vehicle, though. The goal is to just go with what makes you happy. And don't stop and turn around at the first border you hit.